someone who has worked from a home office and studio for over 20 years, I suppose I could be thinking, what's all the fuss about having to work from home? But then here at BizVision, we've set ourselves up accordingly, as you can see with our studio. But there are many other people who have not, and they're having to juggle work and meals around tables, online meetings with barking dogs, strategy planning with children's playtime, and so much other things. It could be all very stressful, but likely to be the norm for many of us for the future as workplaces change. To understand just how much change is on the horizon and what leaders need to be thinking, needs some expert input. The world's leading independent assessor of employee workplace experience is Leesman, and they've just released a qualitative study of employees' home working experience. So let's discuss it all with Leesman Deputy CEO, Allison English. Welcome, Allison.
Thanks, Malcolm. I'm thrilled to be here.
Great to meet you. But before we get started, I have to ask this question because I've read your bio. Where in the world have you not worked?
I haven't had work take me to South America yet. Been for pleasure, but I haven't had to be there for work yet. But otherwise, I've been really fortunate. Right place, right time. Currently based in London, but spent some time in Asia and around the US as well. So
I think that's so terribly important with Leesman being a world business. And, you know, you're talking about workplace environments in different places. I've been in the travel business. I worked around the world like you there, and offices are different and workplaces and environments are so different, aren't they? It must be invaluable experience you've got there.
Absolutely. I wasn't in the workplace industry prior to this, but I managed a team in China and seeing how different offices were in Hong Kong and in China, traveled to Africa and saw some of the differences there. And then again around Europe and then in the US where space can be almost endless. It is it's given me some invaluable building blocks and foundation for kind of what I'm doing now and what we're doing at Leesman.
Incredible, yeah. And people who like myself who are a bit ignorant of you know, workplace environments, and like you there, I was gobsmacked the other day. One of our Indian clients who's in manufacturing told us he couldn't get back into the offices and the manufacturing plant after lockdown because snakes had invaded it.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. But you know, we just don't think about this, do we? So what does Leesman do, and why is it important what you do for both employer and employee?
So at Leesman, we measure employee experience in the workplace. So we look at what activities employees are doing in the workplace, how the workplace supports them doing those things. So how do they actually do their job there? And then what about the infrastructure is either helping or hindering them? We also look at how the workplace impacts important business metrics like productivity, connection to colleagues, their pride with the organization and culture. So we look at all of that and have historically focused on what that looks like in an office perspective. Since obviously COVID has really shifted the paradigm for where employees are working, we've changed as well. And now we're measuring the home working. We're evaluating how that's working for employees. And we're able to directly compare that to the office experience. So we've got a database at the moment of over 50,000 responses from employees working from home. We're comparing that to about 750,000 responses of employees working in the office, and seeing what that looks like, what the differences are, what's being better supported at home, and comparing that again to what the office is good for. Because a lot of what we're hearing and a lot of what organizations are trying to figure out, what is the future of the office? And I think to your point about how does that help employers and employees, I mean, the employers are the ones trying to figure out what does my real estate footprint look like in future? And what is the value of the office? Some clients are saying, maybe we don't need an office. So this is helping them kind of build the case for what the office could be used for in the future and what it's really needed for, because there are certain areas that are just not as well supported at home and where there are a number of employees who are struggling to work from home.
Yeah. So
Sorry, go ahead.
this study that you've been doing, it's incredibly in depth. There's a huge volume of sampling, that isn't it? So what were the key findings that, some bullet point findings from it?
Well, I think primarily what we're seeing is actually an increase in productivity and people being able to work productively at home. So I think a lot of organizations focus on obviously productivity and how their employees feel about that. And what we're seeing is from the home working data, the vast majority of employees are able to work more productively at home. So that's, I think, good from one standpoint, obviously, but there's also a whole lot of employees who are really challenged. So our data goes into lots of different depth, looking at a variety of different areas. So one of the other challenges we're seeing related to productivity, though, is that connection and collaboration. So one of the things the office has been brilliant at supporting is informal social interaction. And some of those chance encounters that you would have and when you're talking to colleagues that you may not work with directly. So you may not have a reason when you're working from home just to pick up the phone and call them, or people aren't generally doing that, but to call them on Zoom or to interact with them. So I think we're seeing a lot of challenge with connection and that kind of, our CEO calls it the secret sauce. What's keeping companies kind of thriving in the office space when everyone's working from home and kind of losing that identity. We're seeing real struggles with organizations there and with work-life balance.
Yeah, I worry for the population. I met my wife in the office 35 years ago. Yeah.
Much harder to do virtually.
Yeah, so, otherwise there wouldn't be 2 children and 4 grandchildren, would they? Right. A recent survey of 16,000 workers found that 43% of leaders are failing in their communication to their people, especially the work from homers at the moment. Does this resonate with you? And how should leaders improve their communication?
I think it's much harder now. I think a lot of our communication before, a lot of it's nonverbal, a lot of it's just body language and presence. And again, some of those informal chats. I think now with the dispersed workforce, everything has to be much more planned. It's much more intentional. So the most junior person in the organization may not run into the CEO in the office when you're not in the office. And if they don't, again, if there isn't that reason to interact, they're probably intimidated to call that person maybe on Zoom, perhaps, depending on kind of hierarchical structures at the organization. So those are some of the challenges, I think, because now everything is so forced and so planned. You miss out and you lose some of the office banter and some of those levelers that different organizations, again, our organization, there are about 25 of us based in London, all based in one office space, sitting around one long common table. And that's from the CEO down to the most junior person who would have joined, a few months back. And again, there was that sense of connectivity in our office. It's been more challenging for us to maintain when we have 25 different people located in different places rather than that hub that connects us in the office. And lots of our clients are feeling the same.
Yeah, I do think there's been some really good advances by forward-thinking companies. So one I was interviewed the other day, X4 Group or Recruitment, at 4:30 every Friday, they have a get-together of the 150 staff on Zoom and talk about who's had babies and things like that. That's brilliant, isn't it? I need some interpretation from you now, though. You say in your research that you are moving towards measuring sentiment shift. What's that, and why is it important?
One of the concerns with having so many people work remotely is that we're a bit, it's been 3.5 months, and that might just be the honeymoon phase. So productivity is up. Lots of activities related to private or kind of personal things. So private conversations, people doing individual routine tasks. We know from our data that the home environment is supporting those well. But we don't have a longitudinal study to show how is this 3 years down the road? How is it 6 more months down the road? Are people getting tired of being in the same space where they, as you said at the opening, where they're eating, where they're living. So we don't know how those factors wear on people. So that's why we're looking to measure sentiment drift. So if you're starting, 8 weeks in, perhaps maybe you're going, lockdown is great. I don't have to worry about commuting. I'm not spending an hour and a half on the train or any of these kind of factors. So it may start out that things are looking really rosy for people. But what we're really worried about is, again, what does it look like 3, 6, 9 more months down the line? How has that changed? And employers need that data because they need to understand what's happening with the employees who are still working from home to figure out what's their strategy going to be for keeping them engaged and for making sure that they are okay. As I said, we know work-life balance and connection are some of the biggest issues that people are having working from home. And they've got to have interventions, and they've got to have measures in place to support employees who are going to be doing this for the long haul.
Yeah, I get the sentiment shift now, and I think that's an important phrase. I was reading the other day, though, the people who are getting fed up of you working from home are your cats. Say, what are you doing invading my space?
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Do you think employers need to learn a whole new range of skills to be able to deliver employee satisfaction and engagement in the future? If so, what skills do leaders need to work on now?
I think the skill it's always been empathy. I think the shift from office to home means that leaders have to work harder to understand what those situations are. I mean, with lockdown, that's been a bit of a leveler. Never before has anyone asked me, what does your living or kitchen area look like? But now everyone's just invited to see it. If I'm doing calls in the spare bedroom, everyone knows what that looks like. So on the one hand, it has been that leveler. But I think we just need to pay attention to how employees are feeling and having those check-ins and making sure that we can understand what their current circumstances are. I'm home with a 10-month-old. So he makes appearances on calls, just as you're around. Sometimes, and I'm not the only one I know who's struggling because childcare hasn't been available the last several months. So I think just remembering that this isn't easy for anybody. And some days are harder than others for different people for a variety of reasons. So I think just staying tuned in and dialing up the empathy are the key areas.
It may be hard for some older fashioned leaders who are not quite used to communicating with people.
Yeah, certainly.
In a social way. Yeah. Okay. I know that no two companies are the same, but is there a way that you can benchmark the data of a client so that it can see where they stand or may need to improve?
Absolutely. And that's one of actually the key offerings we have is benchmarking data. It shows you what average looks like, which can be really valuable because if someone just gives you a score, if they say you got a 60 on this, out of what? Compared to what? If they say everyone else got an 80, you go, ooh, 60 is not really good. What do we work towards to get to that 80? So it starts to put things into perspective to be able to benchmark. You're absolutely right. No two organizations are the same. And the insights and the findings that we share from our research that's what we're seeing on average. But one of the key things we know is that averages mask highs and lows. There is a large group of people that we've surveyed who are having a fantastic time at home. This works for their lives. This works for the roles that they do at work. And we can see that in our data. But then on the contrary, we know we've got some really, really low scores from people as well who are just, it's not working. It's not working for their role. Their home situation isn't supporting what they need to do at work. And those are the people who are desperate to go back to the office. So while the benchmarking data can, again, show what the average looks like, as you said, no two organizations are the same. And that's why the individual findings for different organizations are helping them craft their unique future of work strategies.
Yeah. I mean, benchmarking's fine, but sometimes it just encourages people to be average.
You are absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Okay, the world seems to be moving to virtual meeting, just as you and I are doing now. And I know that's causing a lot of stress amongst employees. So to manage that, what new skills should they develop? And how could they make their home working environment more enjoyable?
I think we need to give ourselves a break. I think that to me is the most important thing. Trying not to fixate on, as you were saying, worrying about the background or the cats or some of these things where, in the office, most people or a lot of people are putting on almost a facade, of I've left my home life at home. I'm now at work. I'm going to try and focus on work. And then when I leave, kind of this binary on and off. And work now has become more integrated in many people's personal lives than it ever had been. So I think a better understanding and a little bit of self-empathy and some kind of self-love and letting some of those hangups go, and trying to integrate that, I think as best we can. To me, that's I think a key skill, because the more fixated you are on those things, the more it's keeping you from being tuned into that meeting. I can't stand actually how Zoom shows, or any of these platforms, but they show you the photo of yourself. Whereas when I'm sitting in a meeting, I'm not normally looking at.
That's correct. Yeah.
I don't have my reflection, but so that's very distracting, I think. So I think just trying to focus on, what's important, and letting go of some of those things that we can't, you can't control, or we don't have control of now, at least, but we're all in our.
Even though I'm used to it, online meetings can be quite exhausting, unless you've got nice guests like you, of course, Right. Traditional leaders like workplaces because they can keep an eye on their people, often in hierarchical groupings. Do leaders need to learn new remote leadership and management skills?
I think those hierarchical meetings, or hierarchical organizations and leaders do. The challenge I think organizations will have is that everybody working from home now has been given some level of trust, and perhaps some of them didn't have that before. Organizations who didn't allow employees to work from home, or had fixed policies around who could work from home and when they could work from home. That choice from the organization standpoint has been completely removed, and everybody's been forced to work at home. So I think if organizations and leaders in the future say, okay, well, now you have to be back in the office. I need you to be here at 9, and I need you to work until 6, and then you can go home again. The trust has been given, and it's going to be really difficult for leaders and employers to take that back, because employees have tasted freedom. And again, for some of those who have the long commute, for the people that this is working for, and they're still able to be effective in their roles, they may want some sort of hybrid work from office, work from home situation in future. So I think leaders need to keep an open mind about what works for the organization, what works for the employee, and then how do they manage and guide the organization to where it needs to be, but keeping those factors in mind.
Yeah, it's actually finding that new vision and where they're going to, isn't it? That's the challenge. Office space is costly in many ways. It's not just the rent, is it? And technology is advancing rapidly. Do you see the demise of the big, lavish offices in the future? Many leaders, by the way, love their offices as they think it impresses, don't they? Like the mill owners of old in the Victorian days. Is new thinking needed, and how does Leesman help in this way?
I personally, I don't think that for large organizations, and for organizations where the workplace, where the office is a key part of that organization, I don't see that going away, because there's something about how that kind of brings employees together and kind of centers them around a common purpose. A client that I used to work for, I visited their offices in Tokyo and in Shanghai and Singapore, in Nairobi and in South Africa. And their branding was amazing. Every time you went into one of their offices, it felt, you knew you were in that organization's office. You felt the embrace of that organization. And actually, and I went to other offices around Europe. So it makes you feel again like you're part of something, and it really brings people together. And but they were also able to balance that with local touches. So it felt it really, I think, towed the line perfectly between something that fit for local employees, so they felt like they were part of that community, but then you knew you were part of that global world. So I don't see that going away. We have seen in our data that the challenges are with collaboration, and people will still need offices for a number of tasks, collaboration being one of them, but no one's going to go to the office and collaborate from 9 to 6 on Wednesday and then come home and try and do everything else on Thursday. I think we're naive if we think our roles and what we do can be segmented in that way. So there'll certainly still be a need for offices in future. And I think the need, especially if more employees are working remotely, for them to have a home base that makes them feel like they're part of the organization, I think that's going to be even stronger, even greater.
Excellent, yeah. Now, I know that you operate and measure globally, but let's talk UK here. What effect do you think Brexit will have on the workplace? What will employers need to be doing and thinking to attract the right talent from around the world? After all, saying coming to the UK and then work from home may cause someone to say, well, forget that. I'll stay here and work from home.
Yeah, it's true. That is a big challenge. I think one of the things organizations are dealing with now is if people are working from home, if I'm working from home in London and I'm a 10-minute walk from our office, but right now, our office space isn't really being used, I could be in Spain and as long as I have Wi-Fi, I could have, the same work from home experience. So organizations are being challenged with that. And so that will impact Brexit as well. I think if you're recruiting global talent, and as you said, if you say, come to the UK and come to the office once a month or something, they're going to go, but I could stay here at my house in Germany and fly in once a month.
Yeah.
They're going to have to find what that balance is to make it attractive to be here if there is that need for physical presence. And again, I think for many organizations, they're going to need that physical presence in that office. So it makes it challenging, certainly with Brexit and what the future holds there.
Do you think the full implications and effects of home working have surfaced, or are we going to see many other factors emerge, such as company loyalty, drop in productivity, reduced teamwork as time goes on?
Yes, I think that goes back to that sentiment shift and sentiment drift we've been talking about. I do think these things will change. I think I can say for myself personally, this has gotten old. I'm not one of those people who's thriving in my home environment. I'm really ready to get back to the office. And I know that there are a number of people, again, from our data, but also anecdotally talking to friends and talking to colleagues and organizations who and I think, as this goes on, at least in the UK, we're fortunate. We've had, the last several months have been gorgeous weather-wise. So at least if it's stuck inside and looking out the windows, you can see that it's, sunny, warm, nice. I think here, as this gets into winter, if people are, waking up, working from home and it's dark and then it's kind of gloomy during the day and then the sun sets at 4:30 and you're still working and then it's 6 o'clock, you realize, well, it's dark outside. I haven't left the house and I've just been sitting here working. I think some of those things are going to have an impact on how people are feeling working from home, in addition to all of the other factors for with the duration of this and how long it continues.
We've cracked it, by the way. We've converted our conservatory into the Dog and Parrot pub for happy hour. So we work hard, my wife and I, and then say, it's almost happy hour.
See, I think we've got something to learn from people like you. You're a pro at this. So I should be asking you questions about, okay, to someone who's now newly working from home, tell me what you've learned in all of this.
Oh, yes. My wife has learned tolerance.
We probably all need another dose of that.
Yeah. No, with the Meet the Leader show that you're kindly on at the moment, I've been interviewing many CEOs with global operations having to present and manage remotely. What's your personal approach to remote leadership or control? Do you have set virtual meetings? Do you virtually drop in unexpectedly as some do? What's your approach and ethos?
I've managed teams in the past where there was a 6-hour time difference between myself and the people that I was directly managing. I think if you're someone who can't trust people, then that's probably not, remote management is not the right role for you. Or if you've hired people that you can't trust, then, but I think mutually on both sides, there has to be trust. And even now, actually, I've had 2 members of my team join in the last 3 months. So while they are London based, I haven't actually seen them. So we're having to do everything kind of remotely rather than some of those, again, nice kind of informal office chats.
Yeah.
I don't have a particular style. It depends on, I think, the person and what, open lines of communication, what that person needs and what suits them. And then I try and shift and adapt accordingly. For the 2 new employees, we are having regular check-ins because they're still in the onboarding phase. And obviously I want to make sure that virtual onboarding is nothing, it's not what we're really used to. We have people, again, there's so much interconnectivity that we're a really tight-knit group. So for them, I am connecting with them regularly, but for other colleagues, it's ad hoc, it's as needed. It just kind of depends on what happens. And for those that I know who feel, they might get nervous if you just call them. I'll send them a message first and say, hey, do you have a few minutes? If you do, call me when you're free or something like that. But then I know there are others that I can just call and they'll answer and it's fine. So I think it's about adapting style to what suits the people that you're working with and trying to make them feel more comfortable.
Yeah, I take the point. Virtual onboarding is one of those things that we have identified over the many interviews as really hard because the new employee can't get the culture of the business as they would if they were walking around being shown where the toilets were or whatever it may be. But, what happens? Yeah. Okay, look, employees are becoming increasingly alarmed that their employers are presently showing a lack of care to them. Redundancy by Zoom, or Zoom doom as it's being called, seems to be the vogue in many places. Is this something that Leesman's identified?
Well, I think with our clients, we've got, we're lucky because our clients are deploying our survey, which is an engagement point for employees. So asking, how is your workplace supporting you? I think automatically tunes employees in to go, hey, they care enough to collect this information and then want to make positive change with the data they're collecting. And I think this is a personal theory, but we've had really high response rates to this situation and the clients who've been deploying surveys. So we're seeing sometimes, I think the average at the moment is around 60% out of the 50,000 or so. But we're having a really high number of employees who are taking the survey because I think they're also recognizing that the data that they're giving, the information that they're giving is helping their employers make decisions that impact them in the future.
All right. So tell us about the prestigious LMI index and the Leesman Plus certification. Why is it so well desired by companies?
Yeah, so Leesman Plus certification is, it's awarded to a very small group of workplaces that we survey every year. So they have to have a certain LMI score. The LMI score is it's the rating basically from 0 to 100 based on all of the data that we collect, where that workplace falls on the Leesman index. So that's what we benchmark back to. So organizations that have a workplace that scores a 70 or higher and meets a really strict response rate criteria, because again, we need to make sure that all employees were able to give their voice and that enough of them have responded so they get a robust data set. Those organizations are then awarded with that Leesman Plus certification, which basically says it's a high performing workplace and that workplace supports what the employees in that space need to do. We're not judging aesthetics. We're not looking at it. It's not a beauty contest. So we are not saying, it's not necessarily, it's function really, and making sure that it's functional over form. And it depends on what people are doing in that space. So it's not given on an organizational level. Clients don't win Leesman Plus or they're not awarded Leesman Plus. It's based on a particular workplace meeting the needs of the people in that workplace.
Yeah, good. It must, be comforting for employees as well to know that the company is making that sort of effort. It seems to me that you're focusing on measuring three things of productivity, pride, and sense of community. So why those three?
Those are three of the questions that we ask how the workplace supports employees in how the workplace impacts that. Basically, their sense of community, their sense of pride, and their productivity. And actually, from a lot of our clients, those are three of the key areas that they're interested in focusing on. Those are some of their key metrics. From our standpoint, we know that all of our clients are on some level interested in productivity. And we're looking at, does the workplace enable people to work productively? And then we ask, again, how much they agree with that. And I think that's important because obviously we're all paid to do something. We're paid to do whatever role, however we fit within the organization. So our organization should be interested if we're able to do that productively and if the workplace is supporting that. I think pride is important because pride is just, it's an important sense of feeling. I think it brings people together, and having a workplace that, and an organization that supports pride is just important for that. Again, those intangibles, it's something that you can't tick a box and say, okay, I've done this. It requires work and effort. And that sense of community. Again, what I think a lot of us are missing working from home. Sense of community is really important because it helps. It's related to pride, and it's part of that DNA of the organization. That's, again, not one of those. It's not a tangible thing. You can't tick a box and say, okay, great, sense of community. We have 10 tables where people could sit down and talk. There's behavioral shifts that happen to bring that community together, and it says a lot about the workplace and the culture.
Yeah, I love the fact that, you're bringing in emotional bit. So I urge people to pop along to this URL there because you really know what you're talking about, don't you? Right. Look, it's crystal ball time. Are you ready? Are you ready? Okay. I want you to jump ahead, and you can choose 5, 10, or 15 years. How do you think workplaces will have changed? Will it be the same the world over, given your global experience?
That's a really good question. I think overall, we're seeing a big shift now. So social distancing, physical distancing, increased concerns around hygiene. I think that will be the norm until there's some sort of vaccine. I think that's a given. 5, 10 years down the line, though, I think we'll still have chairs. I think we'll still have desks. I think a lot of the features of the workplace that have been part of the workplace since its inception will be there. I think how we'll use the space will continue to shift. So I think a lot of organizations have gone from cellular cubicles or private offices and tried to bring in more open plan, more areas for collaboration. And we know that those Leesman Plus spaces, those high performing workplaces, have a balance of places where people can do individual work and places where people can collaborate. And I think that will continue in future. Again, I do not see that people are going to go to the office, collaborate all day, once a week, and then come home and then try and spend the other 4 days either doing virtual collaborations or trying to do individual work that they couldn't do there. The office will continue. It will need to continue to provide a mix for that. We'll continue to see tech for sure as part of more and more integrated into the office. I know a lot of people are having a way better tech experience at home now than they were in their offices. So I think we'll see more focus on tech supporting the office, maybe Zoom. We've heard a lot about Zoom rooms and ways and places to engage with people who are working remotely. So I think it will continue to evolve and shift in those directions, but I don't see nothing major.
Okay. I never did achieve the corner office and the key to the executive toilet anyways,
But you've got your own job. What do you need?
Yeah, okay, yes, yeah. Well, what are you especially proud about, what you have personally achieved?
I think for me, It's been, I've been at Leesman just over 2 years, and my background is in kind of the graphic design, packaging, printing world. That's what I focused on at university. It's where I spent the first, I don't know, over a decade in my career. And, so I had a really, like, quite a depth of knowledge in that field. And then changing and switching out of that and coming into, a new organization, in a completely new world. And I think finding something I'm truly passionate about, and that I really love in an organization and a space where I feel personally like I'm thriving, I guess, would be something I'm most proud of. Stepping a little bit out of that comfort zone with my background, I guess.
Yeah, yes, okay, all right then. Look, I know that you're an American in London, so understanding about our culture of pantomimes may not be right in with you. But unfortunately, the pantomime season doesn't look like it's going to happen this year. But I'm going to be your fairy godmother and give you 3 wishes. If I gave you those 3 wishes for the future of the workplace, what would they be?
I mean, I guess based on the current situation, a vaccine. And that goes obviously bigger than the workplace, but I think the biggest implications around workplace now, obviously globally, have to do with the current pandemic. So I think I'd like to see that settled, so that we can use the workplace for all of the amazing benefits that the office has, and bringing people back together. I think the second one, it's not, these aren't tangible ones, but the second one I think is what we touched on earlier with trust. I'd like to see organizations who especially, again, that trust has been given to employees now. I'd like to see them figuring out how to move the organization in the direction they want to move it in, while balancing the needs of their employees. So not just company first, but figuring out how does all of that look in the mix. And then I get my third, I guess, wish would be that organizations who haven't historically focused on employee experience recognize how important that is. From knowledge workers, the people doing the work, it's the biggest cost organizations have. And, then real estate generally comes second, and then there's, everything else, but it's something around 80% roughly. So I think having people focus on how employees are, not just how they're feeling, but how engaged they are with the organization. And really paying more attention to that, and making sure that their home environment, their work environment, culturally, all of these things that organizations are supporting employees, I think that'll go a long way towards what the future of work and the future of workplace could be.
Alison, I want to congratulate you on taking those 3 wishes the way you've done, because you've talked about social value, whereas other people would be maybe talking about more parking spaces or... Allison English of Leesman, I've thoroughly enjoyed meeting you, and there's so much great information you've got there, and I urge people to go to leesmanindex.com. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you.